your spirit and fall afresh on us.
In 1992, the United States was reflecting on 500 years of the discovery of the Western Hemisphere by Christopher Columbus. And the Catholic Church saw it as an opportunity to promote a time of evangelization. And so they were focusing on 500 years since the gospel had come to the New World. And it met with some unexpected pushback. A lot of people said, what happened to the, indigenous people in the Americas was horrible, and we don't need your faith, and we don't need Europe, and all these kinds of things. So the Catholic Church in the United States created a kind of a 5th centenary celebration or memorial, and they recognized that a lot of things weren't done right, in the clash of the cultures, and it was a time of reconciliation. But they also said that the Americas need the gospel more now than they did 500 years ago, and they said that every baptized Christian has a moral responsibility to share their faith. And they said, we're asking, Catholics to find new and creative ways to bring both the message of reconciliation and the message of the gospel. At that time, I was not married, and we had, in my home state of Michigan, a few years earlier, had walked 1,000 miles carrying a cross. And a lot of what the bishops were talking about, this, meeting people on the street, taking the message of Christ to the people, don't wait for the people to come to you, that really had been our experience with this cross. So this sense, this idea of carrying a cross across America kind of rose up in my heart. And I thought, this cannot be of God. This is just too crazy and too big, and what's the point and all that. But I couldn't shake it. I used to have dreams at night where I would see a map of America and a cross floating over it. Eventually got to the point I would see it during the daytime. So for my own peace of mind, I went to my spiritual director, who was a priest. I went to my confessor, who was a different priest. I went to my men's faith sharing group, and I went to a Christian counselor to really get some discernment. And after a lot of prayer and discussion, they said, yeah, we think you're on the right direction. So then I had to contact the U.S. Catholic bishops and said, this is what I think God wants me to do. And I had to go to meetings and send proposals and all the paperwork kind of stuff. And I got a letter back from the bishops a couple months later, and I remember I didn't open the letter for about 24 hours because after all this emotional investment, I was afraid they were going to say no. But actually, I was terrified they were going to say yes. I was hoping the bishop would say, "Dear Mr. Murphy, God bless you, thank you, stay home, say a rosary and call me in the morning," one of those kind of things. So the bishops say, go for it. It's like, oh, now I got to do it. So I went to Florida and got a piece of oak tree from the first of the Spanish missions in St. Augustine, Florida. And then I flew to California to the last of the Spanish missions in California, Sonoma, California, and got a piece of a fig tree. And I went back to Florida and put those two trees together, and that became the cross. And then I just walked from Florida to California. Took 4,200 miles, and it took about 20 months. Went through 14 pairs of shoes, and it was absolutely the best days of my life, and it was absolutely the worst days of my life. And it was real simple. I would just walk down the road carrying a cross. I didn't try to do anything or run up to people. I would just walk along. And if people wanted to talk to me, they would walk over to me. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I would just talk very, calmly, but very directly about Jesus. And there were, there were, conversions and physical healings and all, some pretty amazing stuff. So I apologize when I was talking about, oh yeah, I was carrying the cross here, I was carrying the cross there. That's the context in which I was speaking. So thank you for pointing that out to me. I appreciate that. And talk about experiencing the mercy of God. Boy, I mean, I was amazed. My presumption was most people were not going to be interested. I presume most people were going to be aggressive and abusive and really give me a hard time. I'm happy to report I was completely wrong. The majority of people were very, very interested. And I would say maybe 1 out of 100 people, would shout some obscenity or throw a rock or something like that. But the number of people who just, I mean, it was like they were drowning, and that cross was like a life ring. It was extraordinary. And I mean, people would literally get out of their cars, driving down the road, get out of their cars, and they would drop to their knees on the side of the road and weep and just hold the cross. Never say a word. They just hold the cross and cry and cry and cry, get up, get in their car, and drive away. Like, what was that about? I mean, just amazing things. So I do feel that in that journey, I had the privilege of seeing the mercy of God. And whether that was physical healing or healing of relationships, I think it's Walt Whitman or Henry David Thoreau who have this line, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I think if there's one thing I learned on that trip, we really don't know what goes on in another person's heart. Even people we think we know, we don't know everything. And I can remember one time a guy pulled over, and he had been having an affair, and he felt so guilty. And he just walked with that cross for hours and cried and cried, and that affair ended after that. People who had been abused or neglected, or people who had done the abusing. I mean, some pretty amazing stuff. One guy came out one day, he was an older guy, and we're just walking down the sidewalk, and he came running off of his porch and said, can I have that cross? And he took the cross and just took off. It's like, hey, wait for me. He's gone. And all day he's walking. He would never talk to any of us. I had some people, and we were like, so how you doing? Never would talk to us. And he was always kind of talking under his breath. So finally, after 6 hours, he finally stopped. And he said, I bet you wonder what that was all about. It's like, well, yeah, it kind of crossed my mind. And he said, I landed at D-Day, Normandy Beach. And he said, in the movies, the drums are playing and you hear the music and everybody's, let's go get them. He said, we were scared kids. We were crying, we were wetting our pants, we were throwing up. And he said, we were scared kids. He said, when that boat came on the beach that day and that door dropped down, guys were saying goodbye to each other, And he said, God, please, I want to go home. And he said, all of a sudden, he said, I felt this presence of God. And God said, I'll take care of you. I'll get you home. So the door drops on the landing craft. He runs up the beach. Everybody around him is just getting shot up. And he just keeps running and running. And he gets to the first machine gun nest and gets to the second. And he survived that day and the next day and the next day. And he made it home. And here's what he said. He said, every day since I got home from the war, I wake up in the morning and I thank God that I'm alive. And every morning I wake up and I apologize to all my buddies that I'm still alive and they're not. He said, I have been carrying this guilt for 50 years that I came back and they didn't. And he said, all that, I said, well, were you praying? He goes, no, I wasn't exactly praying. He said, I was speaking the name of every man in my unit to the cross. And he said, for the first time in 50 years, I will be able to sleep tonight, knowing that my brothers are at peace because I have spoken their name into the cross. He handed it back. His granddaughter pulled up. He got in the car and left. All I saw was just a nice old guy sitting in his rocking chair reading the newspaper. Never would dawn on me what we carry within us. At another time where I was standing at a traffic signal waiting for the light to change. And you know, this light was red, so I'm standing there. This light is green, so a girl comes walking towards me. And as she's approaching, not audibly, but in my heart, I hear the Lord clearly say, she's had an abortion. Now, you better be sure you got that right. You know, like, hi, my name's JimMurphy. I understand, you know, I mean, that's not going to go over too well. But she said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm waiting for the light to change. No, I mean, what are you doing with that big cross? Oh, I said, I'm just, you know, walking along down this road. I said, I'm carrying the cross to remind people that, you know, I think all of us in our lives have made mistakes, and we wish we could do things differently. And we feel kind of trapped and helpless. But Jesus Christ died on a cross for us to take care of the mistakes we've made. And she's just like looking at me, you know. The light changes green, the light changes red, and we're talking. And I said, well, now tell me, is this the road I should take out of town? Yeah, go down about 2 blocks, you'll get to a light, make a left. But tell me more about what you're doing. I said, well, you know, I think a lot of us, if we could turn the clock back on our lives, we'd all do a few things differently. But we can't turn the clock back. What has happened has happened. But God, in His love, can go back into our lives. And He can fix the things that we cannot fix. And He wants to do that. She's just looking at me. We're talking some more. The light's red, the light's green, the light's red, the light's green. And finally I said, you know, I think all of us at one time or another in life feel that we're like on one side of a canyon and God's on the other. We feel this distance, and we all would like to get back to Him. But sometimes based on what we've done, we think, I don't deserve to get back to Him, or I've made such a mess, I don't know how to fix this. So we're all standing here trying to get over there. And we all stand there, nobody knows how to get back. And then I held up the cross and I said, this is the bridge back. Jesus laid His cross between us and the Father. And anybody who's willing to walk on this cross can find their way home to God. There is no gap so big, so wide, so deep that you cannot get back home. All you need to do is, this is the bridge. Go home. She looked at me, looked around, nobody else is there. She goes, this is the strangest conversation I've ever had. She says, I've never told anybody this, but about 7 years ago, I had an abortion. And everything you're saying, it's like you're talking directly to me. And I'm like, oh my, I'm shocked. And well, we had a beautiful, beautiful moment. And not only was she reconciled to God, but there was a moment where it seemed that her child forgave her. It was extraordinary.
Lord, send your Spirit and fall afresh on us. Fill us with your power, Lord, and fill us with your love. Lord, send your Spirit and fall afresh on us.